On the Ali Plateau in Tibet, there was once an ancient dynasty, the Guge Dynasty, which is now almost no man's land, and archaeologists are struggling to search every corner of the site. In their eyes, the social style of the Guge people has gradually emerged as the dust of history.
What the terrain of this Guge site is like.
It is a mountain protruding from a land on the south bank of the Shanquan River, like a peninsula protruding from this mountain. The back of this peninsula that juts out into the mountains is particularly narrow. He was cut off by the Skirg man at that time, so he became an isolated mountain. He mainly considered military defense. It was made into a platform on it, Some of the mountains on it has some naturally formed platforms.
And the Guge people have built their own palaces at the top of the mountain, and the High Kingship has an insurmountable position in Guge, and at the top of the mountain is the palace governed, and the higher royal power has an insurmountable position in Guge.
At the top of the hill is the covered royal palace, then what is below? Can you tell me what each layer is for?
At that time, we divided 8 districts there, the top one, which we called the palace area. Because it is the highest end of the entire castle, condescending, it is also the core of the castle, and the highest at altitude is the place where it is the core of the defense. On this mountain is the place of supremacy, equivalent to his kingship is also supreme.
The former king could stand directly on the door of the palace and overlook his domain.
Yes, there should be that feeling. Further down, it is a residential and defensive area with some house buildings and cave dwellings.
Guge's royal palace is not only towering, but also a fortress with iron walls, which seems to have not only political considerations. More military considerations also allow us to imagine that the homeland of the Guge people was not always peaceful.
Further down, it has a religious area, and several well-preserved Buddhist temples are in this area. The third mesa from top to bottom is this piece.
Judging from the architectural layout of the Guge capital, the palace is on top and the monastery is on the bottom, which means that the monks are not on an equal footing with the king. But Buddhism occupies an important place in the Guge world, because the position of the people is far lower than that of kingship and theocracy.
Ordinary people live on both sides below this third and fourth religious district counted from above. The place where the common people live in is relatively high altitude, has a very low average annual temperature and few trees. So at that time, the site was in the process of construction, and many buildings were made of local materials. For example, the wall is made of this soil dug from this earth mountain. The most common are caves.
The royal palace is on the top, the temple is on the bottom, and the ordinary people live in the lower and more simple caves. This is a city that stands upright in terms of architectural form. What is even more surprising is that Guge immortals have so intuitively established the hierarchical order on their capital buildings.
This building reminds me of termite nests.
If from the perspective of biomimicry, there is such a meaning, but his natural environment limits it to no way, it can only use this method to solve the needs of a dwelling and others.
This kind of castle, which is impossible to achieve elsewhere, will only exist in that place.
Throughout the Tibetan plateau, it was within the jurisdiction of the Guge kingdom at that time that this kind of phenomenon occurred.
Now I can tell me what the housing conditions of the people were at that time.
The housing conditions are like this cave, it should be more particular. Because it is from our number of rooms, there are multiple rooms with a single room. He has a kitchen, he wants to cook here, eat here. There are also some caves inside, which are used as bedrooms and storage rooms.
The traces of the survival of the Guge people in the cave are still clearly visible, allowing us to enter the life of the Guge people, touch their hardships and feel in the hierarchical society of Guge. The two heavens and earths of great disparity between God and men.
So now many people come to the Guge site and estimate the population at that time, without noticing a problem. It is this Guge site that actually grew in size over a period of 700 years. During these 700 years, when it was constantly being built, it had a continuous process of abandonment. Therefore, just by relying on the remaining remains of the ground to speculate, the population at that time should not be particularly scientific. Later we investigated the cave, and it had 879 caves, nearly 880 caves, which is not to say that the most accurate statistics. There were still many buried in the soil that we could not find at that time, and there were more than 800 cave dwellings at that time. It has less than 1/3 of the dwelling cave dwellings, and the other 2/3 are used as warehouses, Buddhist halls, and defenses. Even now in the Ali area, the family is not particularly populated. If it were not for this 3 generations of the same church, a family of 4 or 5 would be counted as 5, and it would be more than 1,000 people.
From the architecture of Guge, we can see that this is a society with a strict hierarchy. In the royal, theocratic, and secular worlds, some people's behavior is regulated on a certain level. Then look at the living environment of the Guge people. The natural environment here can be said to be quite harsh, not a rich home.
So how did Ali feed this huge dynasty?
Ali resources are not so poor that they have nothing. From historical documents to the present, geological surveys, where there are saltwater lakes. The point was also an important source of finance for the Guge dynasty at the time, and one that this LED needed now. Although he had 7 lines, but the traditional one belonged to Google. This Ali region it is now, although it has 7 counties. But this Guge as it is in the west, the so-called West 4th line, just the West 4 counties. East 3rd line should belong to the Changtang Plateau. It belongs to the northern Tibet landform. Especially in the Xianghe Valley in the heart of this Guge kingdom, it is such an economy of half agriculture and half grazing. It is such an economy. It is in this Shangquan River that he forms some oases of different sizes on both sides and tributaries of the Shangquan River, just like the oases on the Gobi Desert. Because of the water, it forms an oasis. It's that mesh like a branch. So these tributaries form this oasis of varying sizes. There is traditional irrigated agriculture, because he mastered the technique of irrigated agriculture very early, so until now, Zada and Pulan counties are still considered to be the granaries of the Ali region. It can grow some barley, peas, including rapeseed. So he speaks from this natural environment and this natural resource. There is no problem in feeding a certain number of people in such a region.
In this vast homeland, the Guge not only did not crave a lack of resources. Instead, they made full use of nature's meager gifts, and they not only survived tenaciously, but also created a religious culture that amazed future generations. One of the heydays of Tibetan Buddhism began in Guge. Guge has left many mysteries for future generations, and has also left countless beings that will always jump between heaven and earth. They are man-eating beasts, they are the embodiment of the devil, and all this is the human imagination or the truth of history.